Well, if I didn't fear for BioWare's life as a studio before, I sure as hell do now because three flops in a row, not a great track record, and EA is known for shutting down studios that don't show results. And BioWare was already on thin ice with past failures, and now seeing the results surrounding Dragon Age The Veilguard and how it did not meet sales expectations, like, I don't know if Mass Effect 5 will actually end up happening. Officially, there's nothing indicating that EA is going to shut down Bio or anything of the sort. It would seem as though Mass Effect 5 is still in development, but I don't know, just the future of BioWare it feels a lot less certain given recent development. So Dragon Age The Veilguard is the latest entry in the Dragon Age series. You can see right here that while reception, critically speaking, is positive leaning, the user score is not good looking on Metacritic. It is more positive on Steam, but it's not a whole lot better. Overall reviews are sitting at a 70%, mostly positive, though recent reviews have gone down to a mixed score of 64%. It's definitely not among the highest rated BioWare games, and what BioWare really needed with Dragon Age The Veilguard was not something that was good enough, but rather like a big home run, and they didn't quite hit that with Dragon Age The Veilguard, and you can see that reflected in the player numbers, where the all-time peak is at 89,418 players, which, you know, when it comes to how BioWare games have performed on Steam, it is definitely, in terms of overall records, pretty high, but when you compare that to other single-player releases, it just doesn't indicate that this game sold gangbusters. I mean, when you look at how Stalker 2 performed better than Dragon Age did, with Stalker, you know, arguably being a more niche IP, the fact that it managed to do an all-time peak concurrent player number on Steam of 121,335 players compared to Dragon Age's 89,418, that highlights that Dragon Age, especially given how well the previous entry sold, just didn't achieve the results that would have been ideal. And there were already early signs that Dragon Age The Veilguard was facing an uphill battle in terms of sales, with IGN having spoken to analyst Matt Piscatella from Circana, who said the following shortly after Dragon Age The Veilguard's launch. Just looking at the first days of sales and initial engagement levels via Circana's player engagement tracker, it's been a good but not great launch. And again, BioWare right now needs a great launch, not just a good launch. Dragon Age The Veilguard did not reach launch week sales levels of either Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or Dragon's Dogma 2, and it will be a bit of an uphill battle to reach Inquisition's lifetime sales. But again, it's very early and a lot of the story is left to be told. And then another sign that Dragon Age The Veilguard wasn't selling as well as EA had hoped was the fact that it went on sale just a month after its release. During Black Friday, The Veilguard went as low as $54, over 20% off on Amazon and Walmart during Black Friday. This usually doesn't happen for a brand new AAA game that is selling very well. They usually will keep it at the peak price point to maximize revenue. So the fact that EA was willing to bring the price down for this time period suggested that they were seeking to boost sales by offering a more compelling price point. But as we learned very recently, that wouldn't be enough for the game to meet what EA hoped Dragon Age The Veilguard would do in terms of sales numbers. This right here is a press release from January 22nd, 2025, where EA admitted that Dragon Age The Veilguard woefully missed the mark in terms of sales numbers. So here's what EA said in the following press release. EA's initial guidance for fiscal year 2025 anticipated mid-single-digit growth in live services net bookings. However, the company now projects a mid-single-digit decline, with global football accounting for the majority of the change. This press release doesn't just talk about Dragon Age The Veilguard's disappointing sales performance, but also that of what was formerly known as FIFA and now known as EAFC, with the latest entry not having performed as well as they'd like. The franchise experienced a slowdown as early momentum in the first fiscal third quarter did not sustain through to the end. And then right here we have the bit where EA report sales numbers for Dragon Age The Veilguard and just how badly it missed the mark, stating, quote, separately, Dragon Age engaged approximately 1.5 million players during the quarter, down nearly 50% from the company's expectations. So that means that EA had hoped that Dragon Age The Veilguard would sell at least 3 million units, and it only managed to push 1.5 million. Now look, 1.5 million is still a substantial number, but when we're talking about a AAA game on the scale of Dragon Age The Veilguard that was in development for nearly a decade, those are paltry numbers, with the expectation being 3 million units. The fact that they only achieved half that, I mean, those are abysmal results. That likely means that EA lost money on Dragon Age The Veilguard, and it led to less than ideal looking results when it comes to financial guidance. EA's own CEO Andrew Wilson had the following to say on that front: Dragon Age and EA Sports FC 25 underperformed our net bookings expectations. Now, given how much value EA places on live services in particular, the fact that EA Sports FC 25 underperformed is actually the bigger deal, but Dragon Age The Veilguard being kind of this test on whether Bioware is able to kind of bring back the thunder they used to once have, and it having failed on that front with Dragon Age The Veilguard, just not having captured the interest of the gaming community on a level that BioWare and EA would have liked, that is just, it doesn't bode well for the future of BioWare. Especially when you look at how Dragon Age The Veilguard sales compared to past entries in the series. The previous Dragon Age entry, Dragon Age Inquisition, managed to sell a whopping 12 million units in its lifetime. Dragon Age The Veilguard, over the course of 3 months, only managed to sell 1/6 of that. It didn't even sell as well as Dragon Age 2 did, which was previously considered to be the kind of black sheep of the series. Dragon Age Origins sold 3.2 million units, a little over twice that of what Dragon Age The Veilguard managed to accomplish. Now, who knows, maybe over the course of its entire lifespan, Dragon Age The Veilguard will somehow manage to sell more units, but I don't think that's entirely likely. There's just this lack of momentum surrounding Dragon Age The Veilguard. There's a lack of buzz, and I think that in large part has to do with Dragon Age The Veilguard just not quite feeling like Dragon Age. The kind of tone and atmosphere and aesthetic that it went for, to me, it almost feels like a Disney-fied or like a Marvel-fied version of Dragon Age. When I booted up Dragon Age Origins after having played a bit of Dragon Age The Veilguard, the difference was night and day. Dragon Age Origins, just from the opening cutscene, I felt that like dark fantasy grittiness and just how seriously it took itself. Whereas Dragon Age The Veilguard, it just feels like this sanitized, sterilized version of what I used to know Dragon Age to be, that just made Dragon Age The Veilguard nowhere near as gripping in its opening hours in the same way that Dragon Age Origins was. While it's not like the worst product ever made, it doesn't deliver to the target audience. And then on top of that, aspects like the RPG elements and the writing and the combat fall short compared to what previous entries accomplished. While Dragon Age The Veilguard is the most technically sound product that BioWare has released in a while, especially when you look back at how Anthem and Mass Effect Andromeda launched, it still doesn't change the fact that ultimately the direction that they took Dragon Age into wasn't the right one, and the lack of interest surrounding this game and how poorly it sold compared to even some of the worst-selling entries in the past highlights that. And when you consider the trials and tribulations that Dragon Age The Veilguard went through, having been in development since 2015 due to numerous delays and overhauling, the project was rebooted a number of times. It was initially supposed to be a live service. That was what the mandate was before they decided to make it a single-player game, all combined with a high staff turnover and the amount of manpower, resources, money, and time poured into this game to only sell 1.5 million units. That is likely a huge net loss overall for EA. Something else that caught people's attention is the fact that Dragon Age The Veilguard's director, Corinne Bush, recently left BioWare. Now, some people speculated that this might be indication that EA is starting to dismantle BioWare, but according to Jeff Grubb, who reported on Corinne Bush's departure, he said that I don't think EA is closing BioWare Edmonton. I was told there's nothing solid about that part of the rumor. Then Eurogamer managed to get a hold of BioWare and EA and Corinne Bush, and here's what Corinne had to say about her departure. As for me, my departure was voluntary, as I have been presented with an opportunity I couldn't turn down. I don't want to say much right now, but you can count on it being in the CRPG space and upholding the traditions of great characters. So apparently her departure is no indication of BioWare's fate, but it certainly doesn't help boost confidence in BioWare's future being stable and secure. Especially with Dragon Age The Veilguard marking BioWare's third flop in a row, I'm frankly shocked that EA has been so patient with BioWare. Prior to Dragon Age The Veilguard, we saw the launch of Anthem back in February 2019, and critically, it was not met favorably. It didn't take long for Anthem to lose development support. The game is still online, but it's not being updated anymore. There were plans for an Anthem next overhaul, but EA decided that it was not worth the risk and or investment, and so they decided to not run with that and shut down support for Anthem. While the game did manage to sell over 5 million copies, it doesn't change the fact that the expectation was that Anthem would be a long-term success, that it would bring recurrent revenue. And when you compare Anthem's numbers to other EA live services like Star Wars Battlefront, you can kind of gauge where EA sets their sales expectations for those kinds of games. And Anthem just didn't meet them. Then we have Mass Effect Andromeda, which also launched to not so great critical reception from both critics and users alike, especially because it was just such a technically messy launch, combined with it just not living up to the pedigree of Mass Effect when it comes to the writing in particular, and the story and the narrative and the characters. Sales numbers wise, I don't think EA has officially disclosed those numbers, but it is estimated that Mass Effect Andromeda sold roughly 3 million units. Not the worst sales figures, but also certainly not the best. It did not take Mass Effect to a whole new level as an IP in terms of brand recognition and goodwill and positivity surrounding it. And so I guess now the question remains, what does the future hold for BioWare and their upcoming game, Mass Effect 5, or whatever this new Mass Effect game ends up being called? Well, we did see Michael Gamble, project director / executive producer at BioWare, who is leading the next Mass Effect game, post about how he loves Mass Effect just a few days ago and how every week is a good week at work for me, suggesting that Mass Effect 5's development is still alive and well. But that doesn't necessarily mean that serious discussions aren't happening behind the scenes about BioWare's fate on the part of executives who are looking at the overall picture and trying to see where they can reduce costs. And when you look at past instances of publishers having shut down entire studios without warning the developers, without showing any hints or signs that a shutdown was imminent, that layoffs were imminent, when you can look back at situations where developers found out that they were laid off or fired or that their studio got shut down through the news cycle and through social media, they were informed that way before the company decided to inform their own employees. When you look at those situations, you really don't know what can happen. Now, I, for one, hope that BioWare at the very least gets to output Mass Effect 5. I do want to see that come out, and I do want that to be successful, and hopefully that can mark a comeback for BioWare, but we've been hoping for a comeback for BioWare for so many years now, for so many new entries, that it's a hope that's becoming more and more difficult. BioWare's reputation is just not what it used to be. When it comes to producing those financial results for EA, it's not done so time and again. Dragon Age The Veilguard sales woefully underwhelmed, only selling half of what EA wanted this game to sell. I'm not saying that EA won't give BioWare the chance to ship Mass Effect 5, but I also do think that if EA, 1 year before Mass Effect 5 ships, finds itself in a situation where they're in a financially precarious situation because of a string of flops that causes them to have a bad year and they need to start making cuts, it would not shock me if BioWare was somewhere near the top of the list, given that the studio just hasn't produced the results that EA would want them to produce, and they haven't produced the kinds of results that would light goodwill surrounding BioWare on fire again, that would light the gaming community's hype for BioWare releases. So only time will tell. This is all speculative on my end, but I cannot imagine that BioWare is currently in the best standing with EA executives. It's hard not to be pessimistic about BioWare's future and to have this realization that they're really not the studio that they once used to be, and that a lot of the talent that made BioWare back in the golden days, they're gone off doing their own stuff, and talent ultimately is what makes a team, and BioWare just feels very discombobulated on that front. It's just hard not to see it that way when you look at BioWare's history of lukewarm to disastrous launches, over the past few releases over the last many years. Or at the very least, that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Bioware as a studio, what you think fate holds for them. Do you think that they'll get to launch Mass Effect 5? And what do they need to do with Mass Effect 5 for you to kind of have that faith for Bioware again, for them to make that comeback? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.